Today we have an incredible story to share with you. A story that involves a mysterious creature, sightings of which have been reported for decades in the woods of Minnesota. But this tale is truly fascinating because it comes straight from the mouth of a former police officer who claims to have had first-hand encounter with the creature. In this video, we'll hear the officer's gripping account of what happened that fateful night and explore the evidence and theories surrounding this elusive creature. So sit back, grab the popcorn, and prepare for a thrilling ride into the unknown. Last year, I was assigned to serve as a police officer in Minnesota, an area notorious for vehicle collisions with animals. It was a challenging assignment that I took on with a great sense of responsibility and pride in serving my community. My duties were primarily focused on ensuring that the occupants of any vehicle involved in these collisions were held accountable and that any damage caused was looked after properly. This meant working closely with insurance companies and repair shops to ensure the necessary repairs were made to damaged vehicles as quickly and efficiently as possible. However, our team also had another important responsibility, ensuring that any animals involved in the collisions received urgent medical attention if they were seriously injured. This meant coordinating with local animal rescue organizations and veterinary clinics to ensure injured animals were transported quickly and safely to receive their care. During my time in Minnesota, I learned that while the most serious collisions often involved moose or bears, the collisions with white-tailed deer were the most common and unpredictable. These collisions could happen at any time of day or night, often caused by deer darting into the road unexpectedly. One particular call I received on a cold October night still chills me. It was around 2 a.m. when the dispatcher informed me of a collision between a car and a deer on a rural highway outside of town. I knew from experience that these collisions could be serious, so I rushed to the scene as quickly as possible. The dispatcher's words were a relief. There was only one occupant and she was not seriously harmed. As I made my way to the scene, my mind raced with the possibilities of what I might find, but nothing could have prepared me for what I saw when I arrived. The teenage girl, covered in dirt and blood, was sitting on the side of the road, shaking and in shock. As I approached her, I could see that she had a few cuts and bruises, but was overall okay. But her SUV, on the other hand, was completely totaled. The front was smashed in, the windshield was cracked, and the left tire was barely holding on. I couldn't believe that anyone could have survived such an impact. As I got closer to the vehicle, I saw something strange. There were deer furs and muscle tissues stuck to the wreckage, and it was clear that this was no ordinary collision. It seemed as though the SUV had collided with a deer, but the impact had been so strong that I couldn't imagine any animal surviving it. It was a mystery that I had to solve. What had happened on that lonely stretch of road that had caused such devastation? The answer eluded me, but I was determined to get to the bottom of it. As I approached the vehicle, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled in the pit of my stomach. Something wasn't right here, and the closer I got, the more I felt like I was walking into a trap. The furs of the deer were matted and slick with a thick, sticky substance that smelled like death. As a police officer, I'd seen my fair share of gruesome crime scenes, but this was different. This wasn't the smell of a fresh kill or even a decaying animal. It was something more sinister. I drew my weapon and cautiously moved closer, my senses on high alert. The air was heavy with the stench of rotting flesh, and I could feel my skin crawling with a sense of impending danger. I surveyed the area, my nose wrinkling at the pungent smell. It was a sickly, sweet scent that reminded me of rotting flesh, but as I looked around, there was no sign of any animal carcass. I turned to the EMTs who were busily attending to the driver. "You smell that?" I asked, trying not to breathe too deeply. They nodded, grimacing in agreement. "It's been like that since we got here," one said. "We thought maybe the deer had been dead for a while, but there's no sign of it." I frowned, my mind racing with possibilities. Could there be something else causing the smell? A nearby sewage plant, perhaps? But the driver, sitting up and speaking with the EMTs, seemed to have a different explanation. "I don't know what happened," she said, shaking her head. "I was driving along and then the smell just hit me. It was so strong I couldn't see anything. And then I hit something." I glanced around again, trying to make sense of the situation. It was a strange and unsettling mystery I knew I would need to solve. I listened intently as the driver continued describing the deer's strange appearance. It was like nothing I'd ever seen before, she said, shaking slightly. The fur was all wrong, and the skin looked like it was falling off. I felt a chill run down my spine as I processed her words. This was no ordinary deer. That much was clear. But what could have caused such a drastic change in its appearance? I'd heard of cases where animals had been affected by diseases or toxins, but this seemed like something else entirely. Did you get a good look at it? I asked, hoping for more details. The driver nodded. It was right in front of me. I couldn't avoid it. She paused, her brow furrowing in thought. You know, now that I think about it, it almost looked dead already, like it was already decomposing or something. I exchanged a worried glance with one of the EMTs. This was getting stranger by the minute. My heart pounded as I listened to the driver's words. She described the deer with an unsettling level of detail, and each new revelation sent a shiver down my spine. It had antlers like an elk, she said, trembling, and no eyes, just empty black sockets. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This girl had to be on some kind of drug or suffer from a mental breakdown. But as I scanned the surrounding woods, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was out there, something dangerous and unnatural. I stepped off the road, my eyes scanning the tree line for any sign of movement. And then I saw a pale white shape, partially obscured by the undergrowth. At first I couldn't make out what it was, but as I drew closer, I realized with a sickening feeling that it was the deer. Its antlers loomed above me like the branches of a dead tree, but the empty sockets where its eyes should have been made me recoil. This was no ordinary animal, and I knew I was in grave danger. As I stood there frozen with fear, the deer continued to stare at me with an intensity that made my blood run cold. It was almost as if it had been waiting for me to arrive. And as I stared back at it, I knew I was about to discover a far more terrifying truth than anything I'd ever imagined. In the forest's dark shadows, the stench of decay grew stronger, and a feeling of unease crept over me. I strained to see what lurked in the darkness, but its face remained hidden. I aimed my flashlight at the woods and caught a glimpse of the creature for just a moment. The girl's description was right. Its face was a skull, with empty black sockets where its eyes should have been. It was skinny and matted, and its antlers rustled in the brush as it tilted its head, as if curious about me. I considered shooting at it, but I knew that if this thing could survive that accident, it was doubtful that a gun could take it down. The EMTs left in the ambulance, and I told them to hurry up and stay inside. They must have thought I was crazy, but I wasn't taking any chances. I waited there for the tow truck, and the creature stayed the entire time, just watching. It remained in the shadows, and the only part of it I could see was the outline of its antlers. I haven't seen anything like it since, but I can't shake off the feeling that things are lurking in the shadows, things that we may never fully understand. Whenever I drive past that stretch of road, I can't help but glance at the trees and wonder if it's still out there, watching and waiting. I've heard other stories from the area that suggest I wasn't the only one to witness something otherworldly that night. It's comforting in a way, knowing that I'm not alone in my experience, but it's also a chilling reminder that we share this world with things that we can't explain or comprehend.